Okay, everybody, welcome to Pete Hansen Football and part 2 of my conversation with retired high school football coach Jack Gati. I hope you saw and enjoyed part 1. So if you haven't seen that yet, I encourage you to go back and check that out. We're going to pick up where we left off, which was right around the time when Coach was getting into his first state championship game here at Concord, New Hampshire in 1987. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and then transfer into his time when he was a head coach at Salem High School as well. We'll end up this video with some of his parting words in regards to advice he would give young football players, young guys just going into high school, younger coaches who might just be trying to break in, and some parting thoughts for them, but also talk about his thoughts on his legacy and what he hopes that people will remember about him. I know I've certainly had a great ride with him so far, so I hope you enjoy this second part and watch it all the way through the end. I think you're going to really enjoy it. So here we go. Pete Hansen Football, Conversations with Coaches, Jack Gati, part 2. Yeah.
And like I said, that group was very confident, and they brought the most of their abilities to the game.
So let's talk a little bit more about that game in particular. Really cold, as we talked about, the little bit of a wind. But we certainly weren't favored, but we were disciplined. It was low scoring. It ended up 14-7. It was going into the halftime, I think it was 14-0. We had, shut them out for that first half. But I think what I recall was there was just a lot of guys flying around on defense, because I was playing defense primarily, and even on the kickoff team, the like every play, everybody was like locked in, and I remember, in the huddle for the kickoff, because I was the guy called the, stay in your lanes and go kick some ass type thing, and it was just like a bunch of crazed guys, like you could just see it in their eyes. Tracy Prue, Jason Caparello, all these guys that didn't get on the field much, and were pretty cold going out there. But I remember the kickoff for the second half, and just running down there and launching myself through the air to make his tackle and jumping up and this is so awesome. This is I felt like through that game, we had it. We had a chance to win this, and it was happening.
There were so many times in that game that were big plays. I mean, not to mention the offensive plays, but I'm thinking about defensive plays.
Interception
that made big stops. Yeah, and I'm thinking of one play. The name just popped in my head, and I don't think I've thought of this young man for a long time. Troy O'Connor.
Yeah.
Troy O'Connor was our linebacker along with Jason Wimpy inside.
Yep.
And he made an outstanding play. And I don't know if it was a fourth down play, but it was a big play that just gave the whole team more confidence.
Big lift, yeah.
As the second half went on.
And he, from what I remember, was the backup to Rick Wester, but Wester had mono.
That's
so
right.
Rick couldn't play.
I recall that.
Our starting linebacker, him and Wimpy were the starters.
That's right.
So Troy had to fill in, and he did an excellent job. He was really quick.
Yeah,
he was quick in that 10-yard box that you have to be as a linebacker. I remember.
And I think what helped back then, and I noticed this is kind of going off the subject a little bit, but players back then who weren't starting were very, very intense in practice, and they made our players, our starters, better because of, and they didn't mind not being I shouldn't say they didn't mind not being a starter, but they worked hard. Where some guys later on in my coaching career, if guys didn't have success, I don't think they played hard.
Right.
And
they weren't willing to play for the team and be on the slime team during the week.
The second teamers, we called them the slime squad.
Yeah.
But they worked hard, and Troy O'Connor would do that all the time. He'd be working hard, so on and so forth. And so when his time was called upon, he was ready to play.
He was ready.
He was ready to play.
And that's important to note, too, because we actually had Slime Player of the Week. And that was like a pretty sought-after thing to get. If you got Slime Player of the Week, it meant you worked your tail off during the week and got no recognition for it other than that, hey, I just know this is going to make our team better.
We practice hard. We practice at a high level, I think, every day. And I think that made the games, I don't want to say easier, but better prepared to play.
Yeah.
In intense games.
Okay, so guys that didn't even start, putting in the work, helping the team grow, getting better, that's a big part of a team, right? That sometimes feels, doesn't come as I don't know, you don't see it as much maybe these days. There's a lot more instant gratification. If I'm not starting, I'm
Exactly.
I'm not happy.
My last year coaching football was 211, and I started seeing that 5 years prior to that.
Yep.
That players, they just needed to see success for them to play well. And not all of them, but
Yep.
it wasn't like it was before. I learned this from my college days, being a practice player, working hard and so on and so forth. And from day one, I coached my second team to play as hard as the first team.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just made the first teamers more competitive.
Yep.
And not to slack off in practice because they know the slime team's going to come at them pretty hard.
Yeah.
And and again, I had good coaches.
I was going to say the coaches played a big part in that, right?
The coaches that were coaching the slime team, built them up, worked them hard, gave them a lot of motivation.
Yep.
And players want to hear that. They want to hear, great job, so on and so forth.
No matter what they're
doing. So it made
right?
them play harder.
Right.
And that was a key thing.
Yeah. And that's why going back to that coaching staff was really good that year, or those years, with Cameron, Poitras, Davis, all them. I really appreciated how much time and effort they spent, day in and day out, doing those things. And we had film on Thursday nights, so another night you had to be out doing something with the football.
What? That was a fun part. I think that's another thing that brought players together.
Yeah.
It was away from practice. They saw me at a different light.
Yep.
They didn't see the intense Jack.
Right.
And they saw my family, my kids, my wife. I mean, I think she would make popcorn almost every Thursday night.
We had a really good time. And
but we also watched a lot of film.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my teams were very well prepared because we watched a lot of film. Not only was it Thursday night. I mean, we watched film of the game before. Mm-hmm. We'd watch film on Monday nights, I think, after practice. And then we watch film on Thursday.
And you encourage players to go scout, because I remember going to Keene with Malay, Kimball, Siebold, and going to check them out because we were playing them next week.
I can remember Wimpy, coming with
too,
clipboard and everything.
Yeah.
But if the players are knowledgeable about their opponent, it made things easier.
It really, for me, it helped when I went to college too, because everything was sort of amplified at that level.
Sure.
I really made a conscious effort to focus on film and watch it, and even go down to the coach's office during off time and just watch film. Because
you got to know
everybody
your opponent.
has tendencies.
No, for sure.
It's not like they come up with brand new plays every week. They might have a wrinkle, but for the most part, they just try to do what they do and do it well.
But not only watching your opponent, but we would break down film after we had played that weekend throughout the season. And we'd break down what we did right, what we did wrong. And I think the players, when they see that on film, they say, oh, this is what I got to do. Or if they made a great play, oh, this is what happened when I made, So they got to understand the game a lot better.
Yeah. And I remember that even, at football camp, you with the cones on offense, laying them out where the holes were very precisely. You would step over your foot and put the next one down, and then if we didn't run it right,
You're bringing back a lot of memories.
Yeah, you would be on us, and you would be like, "Fire off the ball, Caparello," and at me, you were always saying, "Keep it out. You gotta attack the corner if it's keep out versus keep out pass." Because I had to make sure that I was doing it the same every time, so the kids could not tell when I had the ball or not. Like every play, my job was to make that corner in the end or the outside linebacker think I had the ball.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Caparello, but he was 135 pounds.
Yeah.
But he was
tough as nails.
He was a tough little guy.
He ran hard.
But he was very disciplined.
Yeah.
And he started as a senior in '88 and had a very successful year.
And he was on the kickoff team too with me and our junior year.
It's funny you mentioned, the precise.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly, who's a very successful college coach, and obviously now in the pros, he had a seminar doing something, and he mentioned me in my offense.
Yeah.
In front of
all these coaches, right?
All these coaches, and he mentioned that Coach Gati, very successful coach in New Hampshire, won state championships after state championships, and he only ran 4 plays. He goes, trap, off tackle, keep out, and waggle.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that, and he says, and you know why they did well? He says because he didn't put a lot on the players.
Yeah.
You know, he was very precise, and the players knew what to do.
Yeah.
He says today coaches put so much on their players, so many X's and O's, that they really don't get good at.
They have to remember
everything.
all these plays.
Exactly.
What's my job on this? What's the pattern? And that's the complexities these days with these spread offenses, you know, single back, two backs, sort of that run and shoot that was popular for a while. But I think a lot of teams now are coming back to more of the running, grinding it out, complement it with pass. Because it's hard to have a high school quarterback that can actually throw well and read.
I was going to bring that out, especially in high school football. I mean, you're not going to have great skilled players all the time. You know, so running something like what we ran in the T formation, it was so disciplined, but the players executed to the, no pun intended, to the T. And, you know, they knew what they were doing, and it was just very successful. It was a hard-nosed offense, and you had to be a hard-nosed kid to play it.
Yeah,
and
especially the running backs, because you're getting tackled every play, whether you had the ball or not.
Exactly.
And that was a big piece of it. And so we win the championship in '87. Awesome year, right? I remember coming back to Concord, police escort down Main Street. We got the jackets, we got all this stuff, but then we're looking, because I was a junior, so looking forward to my senior year, we lost quite a few guys. We didn't have a lot of starters coming back, maybe 3 of us, 4.
But that's the great thing about the slime team. You know, the players that stepped up, you know, now became starters. They were used to the intensity of practices and so on and so forth, and they stepped up to the challenge. I remember Rick Wester was very excited to lead us as a captain.
And there was guys that hadn't played a lot of varsity, got some cleanup time during their junior year when we played some teams that we were beating pretty well, but they were ready, like you said, and they had seen now what it took to get to the state championship.
Exactly, and they tasted it, and they wanted another taste of the championship.
So,
in fact, well, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, so we came back, we had a good camp, we had a good jamboree, and then we started the season. We played Central at home here at Concord Memorial Field, and they were favored, I think. You know, we were picked as a sort of middle of the road team that year by the papers, and I think Central had a good running back, Mike Duquette, I think was his name, and they drove down to our 1-yard line the first series, and we held them. We stopped them on 4th and 1, and we never looked back. We ran the ball the whole way down the field the next series. I think we ended up winning 38-6 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But we felt like, oh, okay, we're pretty good, but we got work to do. And that season turned out to be a really good season for us. So what were your...
We were 9-2 that year, I believe.
Yes, we were.
And our loss was to Portsmouth?
Portsmouth, yep. We lost 10-0 at Portsmouth. Bobby Bost was their running back.
Oh, yeah.
He was a good player. You know, rest in peace, Bobby. He passed away a few years ago, but he played up at Plymouth State with me too. But he was their starting tailback and inside linebacker.
Oh, yeah.
And they did a good job reading at the linebacker. Yeah. And we had some penalties during that game. Just couldn't get anything going.
We lost to Pinkerton that year too, I think.
No, we beat Pinkerton in the playoffs. So,
right, but didn't we lose from the regular season?
No, our only loss was to Portsmouth.
Well, I thought we had 2 losses.
We were 7-1.
Okay.
And we ended up playing West here, final game of the season.
Okay.
And won 14-13 in a real sort of
barn
burner.
West was very good that year.
Yeah, Paul Levine was the coach.
Yeah,
I'm going to be talking to him too.
Then we played Pinkerton in the playoffs.
Yes, we beat Pinkerton here.
Right.
14-7, I think it was, something like that. But they were a good team that year too. They had Brandon Teslis at running back, and you know they always have a bunch of studs.
Yeah.
So you're kind of used to that. But that was a typical grinded out, methodical game for us. And then, of course, the state championship game against Trinity, which was you know the T on the T. So, what were your thoughts on that season?
Well, it obviously ended on I shouldn't say a bad note, because I was very proud of what you guys accomplished that year. I mean, it was an outstanding season, so you don't really hang your hat on one game.
Yeah.
You know, and the way we played that game was outstanding. We gave the best effort you could possibly give, and you know, we just didn't have enough time to win. But at the same time, I mean, Trinity ran a great offense.
Yep.
And the head coach, I believe, was Skip Swazinski.
Yep. And
he came to me to get the offense.
Yeah.
And I can remember in the summer, he'd come to my house. We were in the backyard, and I'm going through the steps, and I gave him some film to watch. And so he kind of like did the same thing that I did when John Engel gave me films to watch.
So that's what coaches did, right?
And he had a great team at Trinity. They had a great year, and it was as a football purist, it was a great game to see. I mean, how exciting! 10-9, and then they scored to go ahead. I believe on a field goal, didn't they? Yeah,
late in the game, they kicked like a 36-yarder. Yeah, Justin Fussman.
And it was on the 18-yard line.
Yep.
And I can remember that.
And Pepin then almost ran the kickback.
That's what I remember the most.
We were in pretty good position. We were across midfield.
That would have been unbelievable.
That would have been unbelievable.
And
we ran
caught
a few extra plays.
Justin Fossman, the kicker, caught him, I think, on the 30-yard line going in.
Yep.
And we just couldn't get it done. But at the same time, it was a great year. And again, a group of kids that gave their best effort. You know, every day in practice and then every day in the games. So, as a coach, you can't be upset about that.
It was
a great year.
It's a couple, little things. Matt Manna had a long run in the first half on us on a 40 or 41. I can't remember which. But otherwise, we each controlled each other a little bit. It was a lot of middle of the field game. I think we came out pretty good in the second half. We scored for like 60 yards down to maybe the 16, but then we ended up kicking the field goal. Matt Claflin kicked his only field goal of the year.
Correct, yeah.
To put us ahead, 9-7.
Yep.
And then they got the ball back, and we held them as long as we could. They kind of made it down the field, and then he kicked that field goal to win it.
But what happened on that, right before the field goal, we ran a trap. And both guards
we
heard
fumbled.
different things. No, they ran into each other.
Yeah, a little bit earlier. That was a little bit earlier in the game because I remember it was fourth down. It was fourth down and 5. It was the first time we got down. And we actually, coach, to this day, I can't figure out what happened because we had a timeout. We took a timeout, and we should have had it down. But you're right. Both guards pulled. I had the ball, and me and Cap kind of collided as everybody collided together.
Exactly.
And the ball just popped out.
So,
and they
just an unfortunate thing, but at the same time, it was a great game. It was a hard-fought game. And
in hindsight, really was. Maybe for the fans, a little boring because it was just a lot of running.
But like I said, for football purists, we did everything we could do to win, and so did Trinity.
Yep.
And
well, I appreciated that. I often think about that game. Cap and I still talk about it every once in a while, but at the end of the day, to be able to play in 2 state championship games, a lot of guys don't even get to play in one. So feeling pretty good about that. Like that was an honor to be able to make that.
Things that come to my mind when you start talking about things. Didn't we play West?
Yes.
In the last game of the season.
The last game of the season, right here.
It was 14-12. Well, you mentioned Caparello, and all of a sudden this play comes to my mind. I think they went for a conversion to win the game or to tie the game.
So
and Cap made a great defensive play. He was an outside linebacker, 135 pounds, and he tackled a big back, Goslin.
Goslin. Pat Goslin.
And he tackled him before he got to the goal line.
Yeah.
I mean, he saved our bacon.
Pat Goslin played in the strong. He was big. Pat Goslin was like 6'1", 220 or something.
He was a big kid.
Cap was
135. But he had a picture perfect form tackle, and they brought him down.
Yep. And those are those little things, right?
Little things. The effort, and the confidence, and so on and so forth, which made us successful. That was a great year.
It was. That was fun times too, Coach, because I remember, you know, we walked down from Concord High to the field, the band's playing, and there was, I think, 4,000 people here that day.
Oh,
it was
yeah,
packed.
it was packed.
Because West showed up with their fans,
Yeah.
and it was to see who was going to be number one going into the playoffs.
Exactly. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's why it was
And
such a big game. You're right.
The Concord Monitor called it a Wild West shootout.
Not
really a shootout.
I never got the
14,
Concord paper,
13.
but I never heard that before.
Yeah. So, but it was dramatic. It had back and forth. Unfortunately, I remembered I had a keep out and I was running, and you probably remember this because you yelled at me quite a bit about holding it like a loaf of bread.
It's not yelling, it's coaching.
Yes, you coached me.
I got a story about that.
And I got hit at the one as I'm going in, and I fumbled it, and they recovered in the end zone. But their very first play from line of scrimmage, the next play, they fumbled, and Jimmy Tyrell recovered it, and then you called keep out pass, and I threw a touchdown to Tommy Guerin. And like 3 plays,
Yep.
I was saved from my misery because I could not believe I fumbled on the 1 yard line. But that was the thing. I remember you coaching to like, hey, forget the last play.
I'm glad you said
on.
coaching and not yelling.
Yeah.
I got a story about that if you don't mind me telling.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It was 2009, okay, at Salem High School. And every year, first day of practice, I would give a speech to the players, you know, attitude, effort, high character. You know, I would.
Yeah.
That was my big thing every year. And then I started telling the team, this is before we practice now, our first practice. And I said, guys, if you hear me, you know, getting going, getting loud and so on, don't take it personal. It's not yelling, it's called coaching.
Right.
Okay. So my best running back comes in my, he says, Coach, I heard your speech. And he said, I know you said it was all coaching. He goes, but my ears still hear yelling. Oh my God. I laughed just the way he said it.
No truer statement said either, because that was, you know, there was some high volume between you and Coach Cameron.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some tense times,
a lot of coaching,
young kids,
a lot of
it was
coaching,
pups,
exactly.
You know, it was like,
but that's
you got
good
a bunch
though.
of puppy dogs.
You mentioned young kids, but young kids need that.
Yeah.
I mean, they need it at home. They need discipline at home, and as long as it's good discipline, you know.
Yeah.
Discipline to me, if it's done the right way, is love. You know? You know, it's
because a lot of life is that, right? Like the basic things you do, your work ethic, all those things carry over into, okay, I'm going to be a good employee. I show up on time. I get up on time. I do my work. I'm focused. Yeah. So that's why I was saying that as a coach, you started to realize at some point, like this is beyond football, right? This is about helping these kids and helping them grow. And we'll get to the Salem team because you had 2 really good running backs, didn't you, at Salem that championship year?
I had a couple.
Like really. So back to Concord. Let's wrap up that section. The 88 team, my senior year, I move on, but you actually went back to the state championship in 89. So 3 years in a row. So you're now, you know, which is hard to do these days in high school football. It was even probably harder back then because you had teams like Pinkerton and Nashua that were year in and year out, big schools, right? A lot more kids to draw from. So you had a good set of athletes, but let's talk about that 89 team.
Well, I think that group was, I was fortunate to have a guy like Matt Claflin and Scott McGonigal come out off the golf team to play football.
And Matt Pope didn't play
Matt Pope was
his junior year.
More of a basketball tennis player, and he played, I think his first year was his junior year.
Yeah, it was.
But Matt came out as a junior also off the golf team. Yeah. And obviously a very addition. Influential player.
6'3", 6'4", Matt Claflin.
Matt Claflin, oh geez, he was...
Went on to play at Boston University.
Boston University, full scholarship.
All-state his first year as a junior, right, at defensive end.
He was. So that team was, and then we had the transfer from Illinois.
Somewhere in Illinois,
Illinois, Pete Lombardo, who was, and he was kind of very skeptical about coming here. His parents came here. His father's job got transferred. And I can remember sitting in the locker room with him, and he was almost teary-eyed. One, homesick, and leaving his high school team, which was a state champion, I believe, in his sophomore year or junior year. So he came over here not knowing anybody. You know, that's a pretty tough situation. But I'll tell you, the type of team that we had and the type of personality that he was just gelled very nicely together for him. And he was very influential in our success.
Yeah.
as a team, defensively and offensively.
Yep.
And so that team in '89 was a little bigger, a little stronger, a little more talented than the other 2 years.
Yep.
And they achieved, basically the highest level, beating a good Londonderry team in the championship game, beating them soundly. So that team was a little different, but at the same time, they gave the same type of effort as '87, '88. I mean, the effort with those three groups and being able to be in the championship game 3 years in a row was probably one of the highlights of my career.
Yeah, and to win that as well, that doesn't happen very often. And you're right, that team, if you think about some of the guys that were there for all 3 years, that then finally had their opportunity to shine, like a Brian Silfies and other guys that, finally get to play. But you had guys like Tommy Guerin, who was a great tight end, defensive back, good linebackers, good up front. So that was a really good time. But then you had several more seasons at Concord, and then what was the scenario with you moving on to Salem?
Well, what happened was my teaching job, I think my last 2 years teaching, I was half and half. I was half at the high school and half. They were making cuts.
Oh, late 80s.
In late 80s, and I was teaching half at the high school and half at the elementary school, which is a little different for me.
Yeah.
And then the next year, I taught mostly at the middle school and at the high school. And so at that time, there were cuts being made, and I was saying, geez, am I going to get cut from my teaching job? Yeah. So Ken Chacker, who hired me at Trinity back in '75, was teaching at Salem High School, coaching at Lowell, and there was an opening at Salem High School, and he kind of convinced me to apply for Salem.
Yeah.
And so it was 2 different districts going in different directions. Concord was getting cuts, and Salem was getting Wyndham into their system. So they were getting a little bigger.
So so their budget was probably
so the job
increased
security to me at that time was a little better, and
because your kids were still pretty
I hated
young
to leave
at that point.
Concord, but at the same time, job security was most important to me.
Right. And did any of the coaches go with you down there, or did you have to kind of start over with assistants?
I started over, and again, through I don't think it was luck, but I had some outstanding coaches that coached me for the whole length at Salem. And I was at Salem as a head coach for 18 years. And I had Dan Keller, who I coached against. He played on the '85 Salem team, and I remember his number. So he was a PE teacher. When I first walked in the office, I go, "Hey, number 99." I mean, he was shocked that I remembered his number. And so I said, "Hey, why don't you coach?" So he came on the staff. I think my first year in '94. Okay, I can't remember who. It was Dan Kelleher, myself. I had two other guys that helped out too. But at the next year, Dan Kelleher's good friend, Steve Melissus, came over. He was a policeman in town of Salem. And so he adjusted his schedule so he could have the afternoons off. So he came and played, coached with me. I think as a head coach, whether it be at Trinity, Concord, or Salem, you got to coach your coaches what you want done and how to do it and so on and so forth. And they picked it up so easily, and they too had a passion, both Dan and Steve Melissus. And
were you running the T there?
Oh yeah. But I started dipping into a double wing formation.
Yep.
Same T principles. You still had the inside trap, you still had the off tackle play, but you had 2 wings. And I used a lot of motion. I used a lot of motion that ended up looking like the T, but it was a little different.
Still balanced for the most
part.
Still
balanced, very much ball control.
Yep.
And the same results. We were very successful right off the bat in '94. In fact, the head coach at Salem right now was my captain in '94. And those guys took to what I was doing immediately. And so, we had some good success. I mean, I think we were, I don't know what I reckon it was, 8 8-2 maybe, or
Yeah.
but
And you won a championship in Salem as
the
well?
next year in
Yeah.
'95 we were undefeated, my only undefeated team.
Wow.
And we had a lot of players back from that '94 team, and we had a new player come out as a senior. And when I first got to Salem in '94, the social studies teacher said, "Hey, you got to get this kid out. He played his freshman year at Salem. He was outstanding, one of the best running backs, and then he didn't play for 2 years. He didn't play his sophomore year, he didn't play his junior year." He says, "You got to get him out." Well, my quarterback, Johnny McDonald, was his best friend. All of a sudden, the first day giving out equipment, this boy shows up, Derek Demkowski, and I knew of him, and he said, "I want to play football." I go, "Why do you want to play?" I said, "You didn't play the last 2 years. Why do you want to play now?" He looked at me, very serious. He goes, "I want to do something good before I leave."
Oh, wow.
And he, no doubt, was probably one of the best defensive backs I've ever coached.
Okay.
He was that good. He could have played at the college level, but he was a hammer and nail guy, became
Yep.
a very successful
In the trades.
in the trade business,
Yep.
owned his own business. He's living in North Carolina right now, but
Oh, nice.
I tell you, he was a great two-way player, running back and defensive back. So it was, and that team was undefeated and did a great job.
And then you had some good years in between there, and then had a second state championship, right?
We did.
2009?
We were always competitive,
Yeah.
but it was tough getting back to the championship game. We were there in '95, and I think we got back in back-to-back years in 2005, 2006. We were in the state championship game. We lost both games to Pinkerton.
Yeah.
One was a close one. The other one was
Go figure.
not so close. But just like Concord and the Trinity teams, the players reacted or believed in what we were doing.
And did you find that at times where there was a little bit cyclical, like you had a group that really got it and then all of a sudden you didn't, or maybe you got like the younger brothers of a bunch of guys that played for you before? And,
It comes and goes. I mean, some teams are very highly motivated and believe in what you're doing, and some teams come in, they think they're better than they are,
yep.
but they're not that good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes you have
Because the systems
years like
don't
that.
change. You probably didn't change that much.
I've had a couple of years like that, at
Yeah.
Salem.
It's like what's changed?
Actually, one of my teams at Salem, it was my fifth year, '99. It was '99. We were 3-7. Okay, but that team gave me every ounce of effort they could possibly give because we weren't very talented.
Yeah.
But they believed in what we did. We were competitive for the most part. I think we lost 4 games by less than a touchdown. But that team was outstanding. I respect them as much as any team I've ever coached.
Yeah.
But then the next year, they left, and the other group came in. I mean, we were okay, but not great.
Yeah.
But then in 2005, 2006, I had a group that came in and put back-to-back, runner-ups both years. And then 2008, we were pretty good. Then 2009 came around, and that's when I had my 2 best running backs probably I've ever coached. One was a Jamaican boy named Jerickson Frederick. I mean, he was a stud in high school.
He was a man child.
He was.
I remember seeing him play.
He was a man child. Is right. That's a good way of putting it. Because he was almost 6 foot. He was about 195, solid muscle, fast. He was a sprinter.
Yes.
A state champion.
Yep.
The other boy was Max, who came in my office and said his ears still hear yelling.
Yeah. Yep.
His name was Max
smaller.
Jake. He was Max Jakes, much smaller, but he was quick and as fast as he was more quick than he was fast.
Yes.
And he ran the inside trap, and he did
double threat.
He did it beautifully.
So that those 2 backs, in my mind, I don't know if they were comparable, but if I'm going to do a comparison, I think of the Pinkerton, Joe Segretti, Ryan Mahalko backfield, which was just
pretty much. I mean, there was a 1-2 punch.
Yeah,
definitely.
You couldn't just focus on one. You had to stop both.
Max was more inside guy, but I ran the jet with him a lot because he was so quick.
Right.
I ran the jet from the fullback spot. In Jerickson, we were running double wing. I would put him in motion, and he would get the pitch on the fly. After being in motion, and he ran a jet quite a bit, but he also ran off tackle very hard.
Right.
I mean. We had a very high-scoring
Yeah.
I think 95 was our highest scoring output. We had over 400 points.
Now, was the defense as strong then too? Because if I recall, like that 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, there was a lot more wide open offenses, and a lot of teams were having a hard time stopping sort of that run and shoot with a good running attack. And there were games that were like 48-37.
Going back, that 95 team, the undefeated team, was outstanding on defense. They were a great defensive. They were as good on defense as they were on offense. But that 2019, I mean, we were a good defensive team. We weren't great. I think we scored more points than the other team.
Yep.
And I mean, they still made some plays.
Yeah.
But we were better on offense, much better on offense than we were on defense.
Yep. All right, Coach. So your Salem years, finishing up there, you won a state championship in 2009. You had one in the 90s as well. And then what was your last stop? That was your last stop.
That was my last stop. After 2009, we had a good year the next 2 years and made the playoffs, but we lost each one in 2010, 2011. But we also played on Thanksgiving Day. We played Haverhill back in the early days.
Oh, okay. Haverhill, Mass.
Haverhill, Mass. So that was kind of fun. What I enjoyed, my 3 stops, I don't know if I did it at Concord, but at Trinity we played a couple Massachusetts teams. We played Leominster, which was a powerhouse back in the mid-'80s. And at Salem, we played Foxborough, Mass, which was really good. We played Zavarian.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they were really good, and we dang near beat them.
Okay.
My outside linebacker
So
dropped
good early test.
dropped the interception right in his hands that would have ended the game. But they went on, got the ball, and scored real quick. But it was fun playing the Mass teams. But 211 was my last stop, and again, I ended on a good note. I was fortunate, like I said before, I had good coaches, at Trinity, at Concord, and at Salem. I forgot to mention 2 other coaches at Salem. Dave Rosmick, who played in professional football, was a captain at UNH, and I had another one that same year, in '94, Jeff Collins, who's now the NHI director.
Okay.
And he coached me for a few years at Salem, so I was blessed to have good coaches.
Yep. And you had wasn't there another lineman that played at Michigan State?
Oh, Pete Clifford. I gotta forget him.
So you've had some.
He was a big kid.
Mountain.
He went. I believe he went to Bridgeton Academy.
Yep.
Okay.
After high school. Okay.
And after Bridgeton, he got like 6 full scholarship offers. And he ended up at Michigan State, and he was their captain in 2006, which was pretty good story on his part. And I just found out he's coaching now at Andover High School, where my grandkids will be going in a couple of years.
All right. So it's all connected. The network is still strong, right?
He's a mountain of a guy. He's 6'6", about 310.
Right.
He had a cup of coffee in the pros.
Yep. So you've coached some pro players then.
Yeah.
Good. So as you think about, you retired after 37 years, right? You were in your late 50s at that point?
I was 59, I believe, 60.
So a lifetime of football, right? Over half your life at that point. And what would be the things that you would say to maybe a young coach who's trying to break in, and what types of things would you tell them to maybe think about as they do that?
Well, I have a quick story. When I was thinking about retiring, 210. I was thinking about it, and I was getting tired at the end of the football season.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So 211. No, it was 210. We played Pinkerton, a tough game. We lost a tough game, and it must have been 9 degrees. We came back to my house in Manchester. My daughter was with me, and son-in-law, he was my stat man for a couple of years, Steve Vickers. But we're sitting down, had a beer, and my daughter said, "Dad, I know you're pretty upset, but I have some news." She goes, "I'm pregnant." I jumped out of my chair. I put my hands up. I'm done.
Really?
I'm all done.
Really?
And that was a convincing point.
Yeah.
I coached for one more season, and that was it. It was a long run, and I enjoyed it obviously immensely. So things that I would tell a player coming into high school football.
Yeah, or a coach.
Or a coach. I mean, first thing is you got to have a passion, and you got to be sincere. You got to have a passion. You got to be honest and sincere. And as a player, you got to learn to take the ups and downs. You got to be able to. Adversity is your best teacher. Facing adversity. Yeah. Because you learn how to get up. Being resilient. You learn how to get up and brush yourself off and go harder the next time. A lot of kids, they face adversity. It challenges them to the point where they don't like that challenge. Where some kids, can thrive on it and get better and learn from it. But, given the best effort you could possibly give as a player, and again, having a passion to play and having a work ethic. Those are the things I would preach to a young boy. Yeah, and I think, at least from my experience too, was just, time gives you perspective, right? Like the farther I get away from my high school years, the more fond I am of it. And I realize how special it was to play with those guys and keep in touch with them to this day, a lot of them. And we had a shared experience, right? And that was, football's that one sport where it's mental, physical, and some guys spiritual, because they learn a lot about themselves. Like every week you have a test, and it's on a field, and it's physical, and you know where you stand. Yeah. Like, if you have work to do, and that's, like you said, it's funny hard you mention all those things, because football is probably the only sport that gives you all those things, the physical aspect. I mean, the physical, the mental aspect, those two are the most important. I can remember when I applied for the Concord job in '86, Bill Harbeck was the athletic director at the time. Yes. And he told me, he said, you got to realize football is the only sport, and he played basketball in college. I mean, he was a great athlete himself, yeah. But he told me, he said, football is the only sport that 20 years from now, you're still going to be talking about it with your friends. You know, and that's true. I mean, I get together with my high school players, and that's all we talk about is things that happen in high school football. well, yeah, and you think, you had that retirement party for you at the Puritan in Manchester. I don't know if you probably remember that, but there was so many players that showed up from all these different years, and I was like, who are all these guys, It was a shock. But it was a special night, Coach. It really was, because I think that's when it dawned on me about how many lives you touched in a very interesting way in terms of, like, impressionable on these young guys. Like, for me, when I moved here, similar to, like, Pete Lombardo, it was a struggle, and I had moved from living with my dad to my mom, and I was new town, and I was at a bit of a crossroads, and I remember you pulled me into your office one day, because I think the principal or somebody told you I was having some trouble at home or whatever, and you just talked to me and said, hey, don't worry about it, just get settled in. I think you said, get a girlfriend, you'll be all right. And so yeah, you got Cap. But yeah, exactly, right? But you were telling me, you were making it seem like, okay, I was like, all right, this guy, he's taking the time to talk to me, first of all. That was the first impression I had. But then you were words of wisdom. It was like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And it was. And thankfully, I stayed, because I had a pretty good high school career. And we had a good time. Very good high school career. Number 8. So, yeah. So it's I think, I just want to make sure how much I think, players really appreciate it. And the good thing about today is we have Facebook and other social media where you can keep in touch. And I do enjoy that. I joined Facebook by mistake about 7 or 8 years ago. I was I work at Candy Woods as a part-time starter, at the golf course, and I was on their website. I was doing this, and all of a sudden I'm on Facebook by accident. And all of a sudden I'm getting things from former players from Trinity. Oh my God. It was unbelievable, and I love it, because I'm wishing everybody a happy birthday every day. Because it prompts you, every day. I see them, and it usually starts with their number. But usually, what you said about coach too, getting into it, I think you touched upon it already. I think a coach getting into it has got to realize that, one, you have the passion, and two, how much effect you have on young players. And that's a big thing. And how you can change a player's life is so important. It's bigger than the X's and O's that you're trying to teach. And when you can affect kids in a positive way, I think that gives you being a successful coach is when you can affect kids in a positive way. And I'd like to think I've done that in my coaching career.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely say you have, because I've lived it myself, and I really appreciate you saying that. And you know, for me, getting into coaching a little bit these last few years, I'm starting to realize how much you can have impact, and how you do need to take that serious, and you do want to recognize what you say and do, and try to be a good role model to these young guys that are just growing up, becoming young men, and they're in a very big transition of life, and they're getting to that age where suddenly their decisions start having a lot more impact on their life, and you feel like you just want to help prepare them for that stage, that next stage. And football is such a good conduit for that, of all those life skills you learn, and they translate well. So, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned, coaching young kids tender age in high school, but at the same time, I've always treated them like grown-ups, like men.
Yeah.
And I expected them to make the right choices, and that's like the hardest thing to do as a player or anybody, making right choices in your life.
Yeah.
And I think football, what I try to teach kids is how to make the right choices.
Right.
You can control, everything. You can make good choices, bad choices. You have the control to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to teach
Every day, and
kids.
And the resilience helps. Everybody makes mistakes. Lord knows I have, and some of those skills that I learned to be able to come back and okay, I got to turn the page. I got to do better, and want to do better.
My own kids have heard this 1,000 times when they were growing up. You create your own situations in life. I don't know if you remember that.
Yep. Yeah.
Whether they're good or bad, you create your own situations in life, and that's an important part.
Yeah. Good. Well, it's been great. It's been great talking to you, Coach, and really, you've had a blessed day here today, and I think this is exactly what I was hoping for. This type of conversation has been super easy. It's like we haven't missed a beat, like we've been talking every day. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Seems like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Coaching you.
I know.
And now you're a grandfather.
So signing off here with Coach Gati, great man, great coach, and just a great person. So thanks, Coach.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you.
Right. Hey, everybody. Just got done talking with Jack Gati down here at Memorial Field, and what an awesome conversation, and hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was great to connect with him, and I'm looking forward to connecting with more coaches. So hey, if you like this video, hit subscribe, like it, share it, put some comments down. If you have any coaches or anything you want to share with me, definitely put that in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. This is Pete Hansen Football. Have a great day, everybody.